alien observers discovered that human laughter contains healing properties for depression. Part 1. Doctor stared at the monitoring screen for the third time that hour. Something was wrong with her instruments, or perhaps something was wrong with her. The sensation in her chest felt strange, almost like the tightness was lifting. For someone who had lived with the dimming for all her 40 cycles of life, the feeling was deeply unsettling. She watched the humans again. They sat around a table in what their databases called a restaurant, eating food and talking. Nothing unusual about that. They did the same thing. But then one of the humans said something and the others erupted. Their faces contorted, their bodies shook, and they made loud, rhythmic noises that the translation software labeled as laughter. Had seen humans laugh before. Every species in the collective had some form of humor acknowledgement. They would tilt their heads and make a soft humming sound when something was clever. They would flash their skin patterns in specific sequences. They would click their mandibles twice. All very civilized, very controlled. But human laughter was chaos. It was loud and uncontrolled and seemed to spread between them like a virus. One human would start, and soon all of them were making that noise, some of them hitting the table with their hands, others wiping moisture from their eyes. It looked almost painful, yet the bioreadings showed elevated pleasure responses and reduced stress hormones. The strange thing was that instruments were picking up more than just biological data. There were acoustic frequencies beyond the normal range, subtle variations in air pressure, and something else her equipment couldn't quite classify. Energy patterns that seemed to exist between the humans, connecting them in ways that made no scientific sense. And somehow, just by observing them, felt different. The dimming was still there, the ever-present weight that made every day feel gray and hollow, but for just a moment it had felt lighter. She needed to report this. The Observation Council met in their chamber aboard the Orbital Research Station. 12 senior scientists from various species, all united in their mission to study developing civilizations and find solutions to the collective's problems. Right now, their biggest problem was the dimming. It had started with the 3,000 cycles ago, a creeping sadness that spread through their population despite having solved nearly every other problem in their society. They had wealth, health, peace, and purpose. Yet their people grew hollow inside, losing interest in life itself. Nothing the medical teams tried could stop it. Then it spread to other species in the collective. The different biologies, different brain structures, yet the dimming found them all. Some theorized it was a cost of advanced civilization, a psychological price paid for solving all physical needs. Others thought it was exposure to the void during space travel. No one really knew. Presented her findings to the council. She showed them the video footage, played the audio recordings, and displayed the energy signatures her instruments had captured. Then she told them about her own experience, the momentary lightening of her symptoms. "Impossible," said council member, whose skin had been stuck in dull gray patterns for the last 5 cycles. "Laughter is just a social bonding mechanism. We've studied it in dozens of species. There's nothing special about it." "Then explain the readings," challenged, displaying the energy patterns on the main screen. "And explain why I felt different after observing them. I've lived with the dimming since adolescence. I know what it feels like. And for 3 minutes and 42 seconds it was reduced." The council chamber fell silent. Could see the hope flickering in their eyes, fighting against the dimming that told them hope was pointless. "How different?" asked Council Elder, the oldest on the station. Her voice was barely a whisper, worn down by decades of emptiness. 40% reduction in symptoms, said, measured by the standard dimming assessment scale. It didn't last, but it was real. Closed her eyes. Begin full research protocols immediately. Classification, priority absolute. If there's even a chance that human laughter can help us, we must understand it. Over the next 3 months, his team expanded dramatically. They established a comprehensive monitoring network, tracking thousands of humans across the planet. They observed comedy clubs, family dinners, workplace interactions, children's playgrounds, and late-night gatherings between friends. They cataloged every type of laughter they could find. They discovered that not all laughter was equal. Polite laughter at a superior's joke barely registered on their instruments. Nervous laughter from uncomfortable situations produced weak signals. Fake laughter for social obligation gave them nothing at all. But genuine laughter, the kind that erupted spontaneously from shared joy or absurdity or unexpected connections between ideas, that laughter blazed on their sensors like a star. And when multiple humans laughed together, really laughed in that uncontrolled way that made them weak and tears streamed down their faces, the energy patterns became something extraordinary. Teams started controlled exposure experiments. They would play recordings of human laughter to volunteers and measure the results. Even through recordings, even separated by the void of space, the effect was measurable. A 15-minute session of listening to humans laugh together could reduce dimming symptoms by 30 to 45% for several hours. For people who had lived in grayscale emptiness for years, those hours of reduced symptoms felt like miracles. One of the junior researchers became obsessed with understanding not just the laughter itself but what caused it. He started watching human entertainment, the things they created specifically to make each other laugh. Television shows, movies, stand-up comedy, internet videos of animals doing silly things, jokes told between friends. He watched a human comedian named performing at a small club in San Francisco, told stories about his life, his family, his observations about how weird humans were. Nothing about it should have been funny to him. The cultural references were alien, the situation specific to human experience, the wordplay dependent on the strange flexibility of human language. Yet found himself understanding it somehow. Understanding the gap between expectation and reality that humans found hilarious. Understanding the vulnerability of someone sharing their flaws and mistakes in public. Understanding the absurdity of existing at all in a chaotic universe where nothing quite made sense. And then, for the first time in his life, laughed. Not the polite hum of humor acknowledgement, but a real laugh that burst from his chest without permission. It started small, then grew, shaking his whole body until he had to grip his workstation to stay upright. The sensation was terrifying and wonderful at once. When it finally stopped, sat in stunned silence. The dimming was gone, completely gone. For the first time since his adolescence, he felt light, energized, interested in being alive. He checked his chronometer obsessively, timing how long it would last. 6 hours and 17 minutes. Then the dimming crept back in, but even then it felt less heavy than before. Reported his experience to, who reported it to the council. Within days, the entire research team was secretly watching human comedy, trying to replicate breakthrough. Some of them achieved it. Others couldn't quite get there, but even trying made them feel more alive than they had in years. Everything changed when the high command found out. The message came directly from the, encrypted with the highest security protocols. Opened it alone in her quarters, and as she read, the brief lightness she'd felt from that morning's comedy session evaporated completely. The high command had reviewed all her reports. They understood the significance of the discovery. They had a solution. Humans would be collected. Not many at first, just a few hundred for the initial facilities. They would be kept comfortable, their needs met, their memories adjusted so they wouldn't feel distressed. Technicians would stimulate the appropriate neural pathways to induce laughter, harvest the energy signatures, and synthesize them for mass distribution across all collective worlds. It was efficient. It was practical. It would save billions of suffering beings across dozens of species. It was also completely wrong, and knew it. She thought about the comedian had showed her. The way he stood on that small stage and shared pieces of his soul with strangers, making them laugh at the beautiful disaster of being alive. The trust required for that vulnerability. The connection formed in those moments of shared joy. That couldn't be harvested. That couldn't be synthesized. That couldn't be taken by force and still retain whatever made it healing. Looked at the High Command's plans and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Anger. It burned through the dimming like sunlight through fog. She had 4 days before the collection ships departed. 4 days to find another way. Part 2. Called an emergency meeting of her research team in the observation deck, the one place on the station she knew had no surveillance beyond what she controlled. 18 scientists gathered, representing 3 different species, all of them looking more alive than they had in years thanks to their secret comedy sessions. "The High Command wants to harvest humans," she said simply, displaying the orders on a secured pad that she passed around the room. "They want to extract laughter like it's a mineral resource." The team read in silence, was the first to speak, his voice tight with emotion that would have been impossible for him a month ago. "This will destroy it. The healing property, I mean, it won't work if it's forced." "You don't know that," said one of the older researchers. "The energy signatures are measurable. We could replicate them artificially once we understand the mechanism." "I do know that," insisted. He pulled up his own research files, months of data analysis. "Look at the patterns. Polite laughter, forced laughter, fake laughter, they all produce similar acoustic frequencies, but the energy signatures are completely different. It's not just about the sound. It's about what's happening inside the human, the authenticity of the emotion, the social connection being formed." Nodded. "Is right. I've been analyzing this for months. The healing doesn't come from the laughter itself. It comes from the meaning behind it. The joy, the absurdity, the shared experience of being alive and finding it ridiculous and wonderful at the same time. You can't harvest that. You can't fake that." "Then what do we do?" asked, whose mandibles had started clicking in actual patterns again instead of the monotone they'd been stuck in for years. "My entire family suffers from the dimming. My offspring barely speaks anymore. If there's any chance this could help them, shouldn't we take it?" The question hung in the air. It was the central dilemma. Billions suffering, a potential cure, and ethical lines that seemed almost selfish to maintain when weighed against so much pain. "There might be another way," said slowly, "but it would require breaking the non-interference protocols. It would require making contact." The room erupted. Non-interference was the foundation of collective ethics. They observed, they studied, they learned, but they never revealed themselves to developing species. The damage caused by premature contact was well documented across dozens of civilizations that had been disrupted or destroyed by more advanced species appearing in their sky. "They're not that far from space-faring civilization," argued. "They've already landed on their moon. They're building space stations. First contact is inevitable within the next century." "But not now," countered. "And not like this. If we make contact because we need something from them, we start the relationship from a position of exploitation, even if we try to be ethical about it." Let them debate, watching the clock count down. 3 days and 19 hours until the collection ships departed. She'd already made her decision, but they needed to make it together or the team would fracture. Finally, she held up her hand for silence. "I'm going to make contact, not with their governments or their leaders, with one human. The comedian, I'm going to tell him the truth and ask for help. If he says no, I'll respect that, but I have to try." "They'll remove you from your position," said quietly. "The High Command won't forgive this." "I know, but I didn't become a scientist to harvest other beings like resources. I became one to understand them, to learn from them, to find ways for different species to coexist. If we start this relationship with theft and force, we'll never recover from it." Looked at each of them in turn. "I'm not ordering anyone to help me. This is my choice, but if any of you want to join me, I would be grateful." Stood immediately. "I'm with you." One by one, the others stood as well. Even, shaking her head at the insanity of it all, rose to her feet. "We're all going to lose our positions over this." "Probably," agreed, "but we might save 2 civilizations in the process." Left the comedy club at 11:30 at night, riding the high that came after a good set. The crowd had been great, really listening, really connecting with the material. He tried some new jokes about his mother's attempts to set him up with nice Chinese girls, despite him being 37 and perfectly capable of finding his own dates. "Thank you very much." They'd killed. He was halfway to his car when the woman appeared in front of him. One moment the sidewalk was empty, the next she was there as if she'd stepped out of nothing. Yelped and jumped back, his keys clutched like a weapon. "Please don't be alarmed," the woman said. Her voice was strange, accented in a way couldn't place. "My name is Doctor, I'm not from Earth. I need to talk to you about laughter." Stared at her. She looked human mostly, but something was off. Her proportions were slightly wrong, her eyes a bit too large, her skin a color that seemed to shift in the streetlight. His mind tried several explanations: hallucination, elaborate prank, mental breakdown, and finally landed on the impossible one. "You're an alien," he said flatly. "Yes, I apologize for the sudden contact. I promise I mean you no harm, but I need your help and I'm running out of time." Gestured to a bench nearby. "Will you listen? Just for a few minutes. If you want me to leave after that, I will." Looked around. The street was empty. He could run, scream, call the police. But curiosity, the same curiosity that made him study people and situations for his comedy, won out. 5 minutes. Then I'm leaving and possibly checking myself into a mental hospital. They sat on the bench and told him everything. About the dimming, about the research, about the discovery that human laughter had healing properties, about the High Command's plan to harvest humans for industrial-scale laughter extraction, about her desperate hope that there was another way. Listened, his comedian's brain trying to find the joke, the punchline, the absurdity that would make sense of this. But there was no joke. There was just a woman from another world, exhausted and sad and desperately hoping he could help. "Let me get this straight," said slowly. "Your entire civilization is depressed, and my laughter, specifically human laughter, is the only thing that helps." Not just laughter, the authentic joy and connection behind it, the willingness to be vulnerable and absurd and share that with others, the ability to find humor even in darkness. Looked at him with those two large eyes. "We've lost that if we ever had it. We've built a perfect civilization and it made us hollow. But you humans, you live on a chaotic world full of suffering and uncertainty, and you still laugh. You still find joy. That's what heals us." Ran his hands through his hair. This was insane. But somehow, looking at his face, he believed her. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Help us learn. Not through force or theft, but through exchange. Teach us about humor, about comedy, about why humans laugh and what makes it meaningful. Let us share our art and knowledge with you in return. Build a bridge between our species instead of a cage." "And if I say no?" "Then I'll leave, and in 3 days the collection ships will come, and humans will be taken regardless. The High Command believes the needs of billions outweigh the rights of hundreds. I disagree, but I'm just one scientist with no authority to stop them." Stood and paced. He thought about his family, his friends, strangers in his audience who'd laughed at his jokes. The idea of them being harvested, even comfortably, even with their memories adjusted, made him sick. But the idea of billions suffering from a depression that never ended, that spread across multiple species like a plague, that was impossible to ignore too. "I want to see them," he said finally. "Your people, the ones suffering, show me and then I'll decide." Took him to the observation station. It required a small ship that looked like it was made of light, and a trip that somehow took only minutes despite traveling thousands of miles into orbit. Kept expecting to wake up, to find himself passed out drunk behind the comedy club, but everything felt too real. The station was beautiful and sterile, all smooth surfaces and soft lights. led him through corridors filled with aliens of different species, all of them moving slowly, deliberately, as if even walking required tremendous effort. She brought him to a viewing room that displayed live feeds from the cities of impossible architecture, transport systems that physics, parks and museums and universities. It should have looked utopian. Instead, it looked empty. They moved through their perfect cities like ghosts. They went to work, came home, ate, slept, and repeated the cycle. Some smiled, but the smiles didn't reach their eyes. Watched a family eating dinner together in complete silence, and something in his chest cracked. "How long have they been like this?" he asked quietly. "Some of them their entire lives. The dimming doesn't spare children once it takes hold." Showed him more footage. Schools where students sat listless. Hospitals full of people who weren't physically sick but had simply given up on being alive. Thought about his own struggles with depression in his 20s, that gray period where nothing seemed worth the effort. But he'd climbed out of it, with help from therapy and medication, and forcing himself to keep performing even when he didn't want to. These people had no way out. They'd tried everything and found nothing that worked. Until they'd heard humans laugh. "Okay," said, "I'll help, but we do this my way. No harvesting, no forcing, no taking. We build something real, a cultural exchange. Comedy for whatever you can teach us. Connection for connection. Deal." Smiled, a real smile that transformed her face. "Deal. But first, I need to make a phone call. You're about to get a lot more humans involved, and some of them are going to be way better at this than me." Part 3. Spent 2 days making calls, sending emails, and having conversations that started with, "I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out." He contacted comedian friends, improvisation teachers, writers, and performers. He explained the situation, showed them the footage had given him, and asked for volunteers. The response surprised him. Oh, people thought he was insane at first. But when he showed them the evidence, when they saw the children sitting listless in schools, when they understood what was at stake, nearly everyone said yes. Comedians were used to being broke and unappreciated. The idea of their art actually saving lives, that resonated. Within 48 hours, had assembled a team of 20 humans, stand-up comedians, improv performers, comedy writers, and even a professor of humor studies from UCLA. They gathered at the observation station, transported up in small groups, all of them stunned by the reality of alien contact. Introduced them to her research team. The humans and stared at each other awkwardly, neither group quite knowing how to begin. The weight of potential disaster hung over everything. The collection ships were still coming, would arrive in less than 24 hours unless something changed. "Right," said, clapping his hands together. "Let's start simple, is it? You laughed at my comedy. Tell me what made it funny to you." Shifted nervously, surrounded by 20 humans all looking at him expectantly. I think it was the honesty. You talked about your failures and embarrassments as if they were gifts. Would never share such things. We present only our competence and accomplishments, but you made weakness seem human, connected." "That's the key to a lot of comedy," said Maya, one of the improv performers. "Vulnerability creates connection. When I mess up on stage and acknowledge it, the audience laughs with me, not at me. We're all in it together." "Can you show us?" asked. The humans looked at each other, then nodded. What followed was the strangest performance any of them had ever given. They did improv games, told stories, shared jokes, and explained the theory behind what made things funny. They broke down timing, callback structure, the rule of three, misdirection, wordplay, physical comedy, and observational humor. But more importantly, they demonstrated authenticity. When jokes fell flat, they acknowledged it and laughed at themselves. When something unexpected happened, they ran with it. When cultural references didn't translate, they found new ways to explain the concepts. The researchers watched intently, taking notes, asking questions. Slowly, carefully, some of them started trying to participate. Their attempts were awkward and stilted at first, but the humans encouraged them, built on their offers, found ways to make collaboration work despite the massive cultural gap. And then, the scientist whose mandibles had been silent for so long made a joke. It wasn't a very good joke, a clumsy pun based on mistranslating a human idiom. But she'd tried, genuinely tried to be funny, and the effort itself was so earnest that several humans started laughing. The laughter spread. Others joined in, their polite hums transforming into something closer to genuine amusement. And when Saw actually laugh again, that same full-body experience he'd had while watching comedy alone, felt tears in his eyes. "There it is," whispered, staring at her instruments. "The energy patterns, they're generating them themselves, we're learning." The session went for 6 hours, only ending when the humans were exhausted and they were overwhelmed by processing more emotion than they'd felt in years. They'd barely scratched the surface of what comedy could be, but it was a start. Found afterwards in the observation deck, staring at her on the displays. "The collection ships arrive in 17 hours, she said quietly. "I need to contact the High Command, convince them to abort the mission. But I don't know if a few hours of comedy classes will be enough evidence." "Then we give them more," said. "We give them a show." They worked through the night, and his team crafted a performance specifically designed to bridge the gap between human and experience. They wrote sketches about the universal absurdities of existence, about trying and failing and trying again, about finding connection in unexpected places. They incorporated what they'd learned about culture, making references that would resonate with that audience. Meanwhile, team arranged for the performance to be broadcast across the collective. Every major city, every public space, every home screen would carry the signal. The High Command couldn't suppress it even if they tried. The performance space was small, just the observation deck converted into a makeshift theater. But the audience was billions, watching from across multiple worlds. Stood backstage with his team, feeling the weight of 2 civilizations balanced on the next hour. "If we fail, people get harvested," said Devon, one of the other comedians. "If we succeed, we change the entire future of human-alien relations. No pressure." "Don't think about that," Maya said. "Just think about connecting. That's all we've ever done. We just have to do it across species." They started with, he walked onto the stage, looked at the camera that would carry his image across the stars, and took a breath. Then he began talking about the weirdest week of his life, about being contacted by aliens, about realizing that the art form he'd chosen for no good reason, except it made him happy, was somehow exactly what the universe needed. He was honest about his fear, his confusion, his sense of being completely unprepared for this responsibility. He made fun of himself, shared his failures, acknowledged the absurdity of a mid-level comedian from San Francisco becoming an interstellar ambassador for laughter. And the observation deck laughed, cautiously at first, then more freely. Stood among them, tears streaming down her face because laughing and crying were apparently related for humans, something they were learning to appreciate. The other performers followed. They did improv, inviting volunteers on stage to participate. They told stories. They performed physical comedy that required no translation. They built on each other's energy, created moments of genuine connection and surprise and joy. Ended up on stage at one point, accidentally knocking over a prop in his nervousness. Instead of apologizing formally as he normally would, he stared at it, looked at the audience and said, "I meant to do that. It's called physical comedy." The delivery was deadpan and awkward and somehow perfect. The observation deck erupted. An hour into the performance, his communicator chimed, a priority message from the High Command. She stepped off to the side to read it, her heart pounding. The message was short: collection mission aborted, cultural exchange protocols approved, continue research, report progress weekly. Looked up at the stage, where was teaching a group of researchers how to do a simple improv game called Yes and. They were clumsy and earnest and laughing at their own mistakes. Behind them, the live feed showed similar scenes erupting across worlds. People gathering in public spaces to watch together, their isolation breaking, the dimming lifting just a little bit as they shared in something new. It wasn't a cure. The dimming would still be there tomorrow, still heavy and hard to bear. But now they had a tool to fight it, a way to connect with each other and with humans. They had hope, real hope for the first time in. Saw her crying and stepped off stage, concerned. Is it bad news? No, said, laughing through her tears. It's very good news, you did it. You saved them, you saved us. Shook his head. We did it, humans and together, that's kind of the point, isn't it? Over the next months, the cultural exchange expanded. The observation station became a permanent facility, renamed the Bridge. Human comedians rotated through on month-long residencies, teaching workshops and performing shows. Artists came to Earth, sharing their music and visual arts, their mathematical poetry and philosophical frameworks. The humans learned that had a concept of beauty that operated on frequencies humans couldn't hear, creating art that existed partially in dimensions human senses couldn't perceive. They learned that humans could find humor in literally anything, including their own suffering, and that this ability was a form of resilience rather than denial. Became something he'd never expected, Earth's first interstellar comedian and unofficial ambassador. He performed for mixed audiences, human and alien, crafting material that worked across the species divide. His act became less about getting laughs and more about creating moments of connection, building bridges one joke at a time. Research continued, but shifted focus. She studied not just the healing properties of laughter, but the broader implications of cultural exchange between species. She wrote papers about authenticity as a universal need, about how vulnerability created connection, about how different intelligences could learn from each other if they approached each other with openness rather than exploitation. The dimming didn't disappear from society. Depression, they learned from human psychologists, was complex and multifaceted. It required multiple approaches, ongoing treatment, and acceptance that some days would be harder than others. But now they had comedy clubs on worlds, improv groups, stand-up shows broadcast across the collective. They had tools, and more importantly, they had connection. 3 years after first contact, stood on stage at the Bridges Comedy Theater, looking out at an audience that was roughly half human, half various collective species. He thought about the strange path that had led him here, from small clubs in San Francisco to literally changing the course of 2 civilizations. So I was talking to my friend the other day, he began, and the in the audience perked up, recognizing the name of one of their own. And he asked me why humans tell jokes at funerals, like your species processes grief through humor. That's weird. The audience chuckled, both human and alien understanding the affectionate teasing. And I explained that, yeah, we do. Because sometimes life is so sad and absurd and overwhelming that the only response that makes sense is to laugh at it. Not because it's not serious, but because laughter helps us survive the serious parts. It's how we tell death and suffering and despair that they don't get the last word. We do. And our last word is a joke. Paused, seeing both species listening intently. Thought about that for a while. Then he said, I think we forgot how to have the last word. We let the dimming tell us the story was over, but you showed us how to write a new ending. The audience was silent for a moment, processing. Then someone started clapping. It spread through the theater, humans and other species all applauding not the joke itself, but the truth beneath it. Smiled, feeling that familiar warmth that came from connecting with an audience. It didn't matter if they had 2 legs or 4, skin or scales, lungs or respiratory membranes. In that moment, they were all the same, beings finding their way through an absurd universe, choosing to laugh together rather than suffer alone. Anyway, continued, shifting back to his comedy rhythm. Let me tell you about the time I tried to explain knock-knock jokes to a species that communicates through scent. That went exactly as well as you'd expect. The laughter that followed was genuine, unforced, and healing. It echoed through the bridge, out into space, and across two civilizations learning to share the beautiful disaster of existence together. And for everyone present, human and alien alike, the universe felt a little bit lighter.